Doctor, my first question to you is how does the brain process and integrate sensory information from the vestibular system to maintain balance during a pirouette spin?
So there's a very intricate and a complicated mechanism by which it is done. So we can either go through the ear up to the brain, or we can come down from the brain to the ear. But like grossly, inside in our inner ear, there are some canals, and in those canals there are little particulate matter, canaliculi, and otoliths are there, which it is a technical term, but basically you can understand that they are small particulate matter. So whenever we move or we spin or we bend, or there is linear acceleration up and down or forwards and backwards, the position of those canaliculi and the otoliths, they change. So that change in the signal, there are some hairy cells inside the inner ear, and then those hair cells are connected to fine nerves. All those nerves integrate to find a major nerve, to form a major nerve, that is the eighth nerve, the nerve that is related to our hearing as well as the balance. So there are two components. So it is called the vestibulo-cochlear nerve. So cochlear part is pertaining to the hearing, and vestibular part is pertaining to the balance. So this particular hairy cells and the terminal nerve endings, they form the vestibular part of the vestibulo-cochlear nerve. So that nerve, through the base of the skull, it goes all the way up to the brainstem. So brainstem is an area from where the various cranial nerve nuclei, they originate. So this eighth nerve nucleus finds its origin in the brainstem. To be more precise, it is in the upper part of medulla, right? So this kind of sensory information about spinning, turning, or change in the position or change in the speed of the body, it goes up to the brainstem, from where it is projected up to the cortical networks. Those networks are again very complex networks. Then that balancing, that particular signal is processed by the brain. And then if we are getting disbalance, or if we have to maintain a vertical posture even when we are spinning to prevent us from falling, so that particular system, it sensitizes or it stimulates various other end organs, like one of them is cerebellum. So cerebellum is also very important to maintain our balance. So cerebellum, and then through the spinal cord, the message is sent to our nerves and then to the muscles to maintain the erect body posture. So if anywhere in this whole networking, if there is any fault, or if it is not processed properly, then we might lose our balance and fall. So majority of patients that we see in our clinics, so when they suddenly bend their head, or whenever they suddenly elevate their head or suddenly look towards one side, those particulate matter, they take some time to find their right position. So till the time they're not gone into their original position, till that time some abnormal signals, they keep on going to the brain that the position of the head is not normal. That is perceived as a vertigo sensation or spinning sensation, and people call it that they are having chakkar, or they are having giddiness. So if this is a very rapid mechanism, like we change the position of our head, and those particles, they immediately reposition themselves. There's no lag period in between. That is why we do not realize in a normal person that we have changed our position, or we are going up or down or whatever. But in people where this degeneration has happened and these otoliths do not settle down, till the time it doesn't settle down, they have that spinning sensation. So this is whole of the mechanism in short.
Yeah. And also, doctor, can you explain the specific neural pathways involved in proprioception and how they aid in like a dancer's balance? And especially, during the pirouette, most dancers wear point shoes. So where they aren't even on the toes, they're literally on the ball of the toe, and then they're spinning. And also a lot of times in performances, it's like they're doing so many moves, and then suddenly they have to spin like 20 times.
Right.
So
So the mechanism is basically the same, only the networking is different. So when you talk about proprioception, you mean to say that there are two kinds of nerves in our body. One are small fibers and one are the large fibers. So these are both type of sensory fibers. So small fibers are responsible for the abnormal, like if we are keeping our hand in a particular position for some time, you feel those tiny pins and needle sensation. So that kind of pins and needle sensation, that numbness is produced by the small fibers. and these large fibers are largely responsible for maintaining of our balance. So in all our joints, these large fibers take their origin, and they go all the way up to the from the spinal cord up to the brain. So they occupy the posterior part of the spinal cord. So from all our joints and all our end organs, whether it be toes or our ankle or our knees, so all our joints, they are sending these large fibers up. They are thickly myelinated. That means they have a lot of insulation over them, so that they conduct very faster. Unlike the small fibers, which I was talking about earlier, they are not insulated, so they conduct very slowly. Because balancing is like a very immediate procedure, and even if there is a lag of fraction of a second, we might fall.
Yeah.
So these fibers are largely responsible for maintaining of our balance, and that is the reason why they are very large and they are very thickly myelinated. So whenever we place our foot or our hand in a particular position, so that signal is sent to the brain automatically through the spinal cord. The spinal cord goes through it passes through the brainstem, and then again it goes to the thalamus. The thalamus sends it to the cortex, and then again through the same pathway it goes down and innervates our muscles. So that whenever our foot is placed in some abnormal position or in some particular position, our brain receives the signal that our body is standing in such a position, and we have to maintain our balance. So again, the cerebellum and all the nerves and muscles get activated so that we are able to maintain an erect posture. And because we are consciously doing that, so some cortical responses also add on to it, that we have to maintain this kind of posture. So proprioception is basically about the nerve inputs that are being received from the joint position. So wherever your joint is placed, that sends a signal to the brain, whether it is properly placed or not, in whatever sense you want to place it, that is placed, the foot is placed or not. So in people like in diabetes who have this kind of nerve involvement, the nerve keeps on degenerating. So whenever they are walking, they tend to lose their balance because the body does not receive the signal whether the foot has been properly placed on the ground or not. So they tend to become wobbly because of the lack of that input, proprioceptive input.
And doctor, specifically, if you could talk a little bit about how the cerebellum contributes to coordination and precision in performing like a pirouette.
So cerebellum has two essential components. Cerebellum is commonly in layman term known as the small brain. So it is a very essential structure, and it is even more, if you talk about the nerve, the load of the nerves that the cerebellum carries is even more than the cortex put together as a whole. So it is that it has many folia, so it has many infoldings within itself. So it has a huge network of nerves and neurons, and it is a silent worker, and it is like whatever work the whole brain does, cerebellum does more than that alone. So there are two important parts of the cerebellum. One is the central part, which is called the vermis, and one is the cerebellar folia and the cerebellar cortex. So the cerebellar cortex help us to coordinate our limbs, our hands and the legs, whereas the central part, the vermis, helps to maintain our central balance, the truncal balance. So when we are sitting, it is a responsibility of the vermis so that we don't sway back and forth. If our trunk should be erect. Similarly, when we are standing or when we are walking, our central balance, to maintain our central balance, that vermis helps. Whereas when we are eating, so some coordination is required, that even if we close our eyes, we know that the spoon is going towards our mouth. And even when the eyes are open, the same mechanism holds. Similarly, when we are combing or when we are putting eye drops, or this kind of fine coordination between the hand or the mouth, or any kind of coordination between the two hands, that is all taken care of by the cerebellar cortex. So when you talk about spinning, or when you talk about pirouetting, so in that, I think the vermis is the most important part, because your center of balance has to be at a proper place. So we see these kind of disturbances in alcoholic patients. So in those patients, primarily the vermis gets involved, and they are not able to walk straight because of that, because their truncal balance is gone.
Okay. And what neurological mechanisms are activated when a dancer corrects their balance mid-spin?
So that's what. So all three of them would play a part here. So mid spin, if they are correct, if they are changing their posture, so vestibular system as well as the cerebellar system as well as the proprioceptive system will help them to come into a new posture without falling in between, without.
Yeah.
And the more you practice, like I have heard that you guys have to practice a lot to maneuver and to master all these movements. So by practicing, you are forming new and new neuronal networks, because in between all these three systems. So that's what that happens. So whenever, if we just talk about dancing, or if there's any other technique that you are trying to master, so the more number of times we practice it, we are trying to form more and more neuronal networks within the brain. So those are not there in place already. People who practice one technique, the number of times they practice, the more stronger the neuronal networks will become. So that is how one can master these kind of skills, by like just upgrading the neuronal network by practicing more and more.
And how do neural connections between like the motor cortex and muscles influence the fluidity and stability of a pirouette? Because also, like, as a ballerina, when you're performing in like a show or something for the audience, it has to look aesthetically pleasing, as you're turning. So that whole fluidity and the stability, and so
when we talk about fluidity, there's another important structure called basal ganglia involved. So whenever we are doing any kind of movement, if we just talk about walking also, so walking is also a very fluid task. When we are walking, our hands are also moving, our legs are also moving, and we are not even aware about it. We have to walk straight, and we walk in a straight line. We don't go haywire here and there, and we are neither too fast, we are neither too slow. The movements happen very fluidly and very automatically. So all these things are taken care of by the basal ganglia. So whatever activity we do, whether we just talking, writing, dancing, walking, running, so all these activities involve all of the structures in the brain, starting from the cerebrum, that is the cerebral cortex, then the basal ganglia, thalamus, then the brainstem, the cerebellum, which gives its input to it. You can also talk it to as a teacher. So cerebellum would detect what wrong you are doing, and it will correct the movement, that the wrong movement that is happening. It will automatically correct it before you get affected by it. And then the end organs, that are the spinal cord, the nerves, and the muscles. So the upper structures are the cortex, basal ganglia, thalamus, cerebellum, and the brainstem, and the lower structures are the spinal cord, nerves, and muscles. So this fluidity is maintained by the basal ganglia. It gauges whether the movement is smooth, whether the movement is very erratic, whether it is very slow, whether it is very fast, whether it is more than required, less than required. So all these things are assessed by the basal ganglia, and then by release of various chemicals inside the brain, they correct the movement according to what you are expecting it to be.
And what role do sensory neurons play in providing feedback to the
So that is exactly what is proprioception is about. So sensory input is all about the proprioception, the proprioceptive input.
And how can disruptors in the vestibular system affect a dancer's ability to perform complex movements like the pirouette spin?
So if there's any kind of vestibular disturbance, even a slightest, leave apart the spin, even a slightest movement of the head will give you so much of giddiness that you will not be able to perform a spin, or you might as well fall down. There will be a lot of nausea and vomiting if there is any disturbance with your vestibular system. So your vestibular system has to be trained accordingly. So if there is any jerky movement in the neck and you start getting those things, getting that sensation, so there are various vestibular exercises which will help you to acquaint and to accommodate your vestibular system more, so that those movements do not produce these kind of giddiness and spinning sensation in your eye.
And if like a dancer was to feel this these kind of symptoms, and what do you think the dancer should do at that moment?
So at that moment, the dancer will not be able to perform, because it will be very discomforting to the person who is doing it, and he might as well fall and injure themselves. There will be a lot of uncomfortable nausea and vomiting. So for at least next, if they ever get this kind of sensation, so at least for next 2-3 days, they would not be able to do anything.
Okay.
So they'll have to rest entirely in a particular position.
And what neurological training techniques can improve a dancer's proprioceptive abilities?
So those are the same maneuvers that you want to perform, the same techniques that you want to perform. You will have to just practice them over and over again. So that is a basic thing that will help you in strengthening your proprioceptive input as well as the vestibular input. There are quite a lot of vestibular exercises which help you to strengthen up your vestibular system, so that the movement of the head does not produce any kind of vertigo.
So what are some of these exercises, doctor, if you can just
In that, when anybody has these vestibular problems, we tell them to. There are 3-4 different set of exercises. So one of them involves at night whenever you are about to go to bed. So first you have to turn towards one side, stay in that position for some time. Then you have to become prone with nose facing towards the ground. Stay in that position for 10 seconds, and then you have to turn towards the other side, stay in that position for 30 seconds. So like this 30 seconds will be total one cycle, and this you have to do 10 times all over again, so that the canaliculi and the otoliths, they circulate but slowly, so as to not give you symptoms, but at the same time they tend to get back to their original position and not give you symptoms. So when you do these rotatory movements over and over again, so after some time, even if there is a change in position of the head, you will not feel the vertiginous sensations.
And how does the brain adapt to like repetitive practice of pirouettes? Because it's not even on stage, maybe like off stage also practicing, in terms of neural plasticity.
Yeah.
And what are your recommendations, if you have anything specific for dancers to enhance their neurological function?
So the formation of new networks is called neuroplasticity. So our brain, there are certain areas which generate more and more neurons in the brain.
Yeah.
So more you practice, the more positive signals and the more of chemical release happen in that area, and more the synaptic terminals are formed. So a synaptic terminal is a connection between one neuron and the other neuron. So the more you practice, the more synaptic transmitter signals are generated inside the brain. The more synaptic clefts are generated in the brain. So that leads to formation of more and more nerves and strengthening of the whole bundle as a whole.
Okay. And what are the potential neurological reasons for a dancer experiencing like dizziness or loss of balance during a performance?
So the first and foremost would be the vestibular disturbance only.
Okay.
So that is the most prone to any kind of injury, because these otoliths are very delicate and the inner ear structure is very intricate. So if you have, because in your dance performances you have a rapid spinning and it involves a high velocity also. So they are at a high risk of getting these kind of vertiginous sensation because of the vestibular system disturbance.
Okay, I think that was it, Doctor, for these questions.